Hello and welcome to Iowa Ideas. This is the ninth year of Iowa Ideas. It's an event that explores topics that are important to Iowans. We're excited for another great 2 days of discussion on pressing issues that are facing Iowans. The Gazette would like to give a special thank to the presenting sponsor, ITC Midwest. The sponsor support helps us make the Iowa Idea discussions take off and really give us something of interest, and it makes it free for all of us. You'll be able to submit questions to our panel today by entering them into the Q&A box or the Zoom chat, and we'll try to work them into the conversation. I'm really interested in getting those questions that you have into this conversation. Today, we're going to be discussing agriculture and alternative crops. And so it's an interesting topic because we focus a lot on corn and soybeans, but there are other crops that are out there as well. My name is Lyle Muller. I am a board member of Investigate Midwest, a nonprofit news organization that does in-depth reporting on agricultural issues. We do have an Iowa Watch office that is part of Investigate Midwest. And I am a former editor of the Cedar Rapids Gazette. So I'm joined here by Maury Wills and James Hepp. And what I want to do is have each of you just introduce yourselves and give us a little bit of background of what brings you here. And we'll start with Maury.
Sure. Thank you, Lyle. So I have been involved in agriculture for approximately 30 years. I worked at the Iowa Department of Agriculture beginning in 1996, retired in 2021. Part of my responsibilities there included managing the organic certification program and pretty much everything alternative to the typical corn and soybean agriculture that we see in Iowa. During that time, we began what we call Will's Family Orchard, where we began planting apple trees and pumpkins and got involved with agritourism and kitchen and bakery and all those kinds of items. So we've been at it for a fair amount of time. The Iowa Department of Agriculture really allowed me to get a 50-yard line seat to specialty agriculture in the state.
James?
All right. My name's James Hepp. I'm 35. I'm a first-generation farmer in Rockwell City, Iowa. My family farms corn, soybeans, about 1,400 acres, along with rye for cover crop seed and oats for cover crop seed. We do a lot of regenerative practices here, including reducing synthetic fertilizer and nitrogen. And I have a crop insurance agency and just been doing field days every year on my farm. We have about 70 people a year come to learn about cover crops on all our acres and ROI, how to drive ROI and small grains and all kinds of things like that.
And so, James, you and Maury are both first-gen farmers. Talk a little bit about, and we'll start with you, James. Talk a little bit about the startup cost and how you went about doing this.
So I went to Northwest Missouri State down in Maryville, and right out of college, I was in a crop insurance adjuster. Always wanted to farm, but it was never an option. My grandpa retired long ago, but it was just always a dream. I enjoyed running tractors and doing stuff like that. So I stayed in agriculture, loved it, moved back to Iowa. One of my best friends in high school, his dad was nearing retirement, and none of his family wanted to farm, or they already had careers. So one thing led to another, started working with him. Started doing crop shares, which is a really great way to do things. And then eventually it worked so well, we bought the land and the equipment on a 10-year contract. The barrier to entry is very difficult. Doesn't have to be, but it is. Like I said, they had enough land base to get me started, which was great. So that's kind of how we started. I just started working for him a little bit. One thing led to another, and within 3-4 years, we went from zero to like 1,300 acres with them. And like I said, bought out the equipment over 10 years, which helped him with taxes. And then nobody could ever pay for a full line of equipment in like 5 or 6 years. So the longer you can spread it out, the better. And bought the house and building sites and stuff like that. But if you were to start cold turkey on our row crop operation, it would, the sky's the limit. I mean, it'd be millions by the time you get any kind of equipment, bins, machine sheds, you name it. Not to mention a house. There's not that many houses out in rural America anymore. So
Maury, how did the Will's Family Orchard get started?
So we were looking for land, and we knew we wanted to do something agriculturally or horticulturally. And we finally found 30 acres in 1991 in Dallas County and made that purchase. And we pretty much homesteaded the property. So I was working at the time. We built a basement house essentially, and it had a shed roof on it. It looked like an earth burned home. And we planted our first 100 apple trees at that time. We didn't really know where this was going. It was not real focused in terms of what our intentions were. We eventually built the house up as we began having more kids. So we were building our family at the same time and then continuing to plant apple trees. But we started, as far as infrastructure is concerned, with zero. We had very little resources. There was no electricity on this property. There was no home, no apple trees, nothing. And so we started very much the hard way. And as we began to produce a few apples and sell a few apples and kind of stumbled on pumpkins, we were growing some for our family, and some other folks who were here for apples decided they wanted some pumpkins. And so we thought, we might be able to make a business go at this. So that's kind of how it started.
What are you growing on your farm, James?
So we have corn and soybeans primarily, but the last few years we've been growing 80 acres of rye that gets sold to a place that cleans it and uses it for cover crop seed. And then we've been dabbling in oats, and we're trying to do more and more oats every year. Primarily it's been for cover crop seed, but we're hoping to get into like food grade oats. And then you got like the straw and some of that stuff too that comes off it.
I'm looking at the 2024 State Agricultural Review for Iowa. 12.5 million acres harvested for corn grain, 340,000 acres for corn silage, almost 10 million acres for soybeans, and they get down to oats, 73,000. So what's going on there?
Well, the main reason with small grains that's not as popular is there's not a lot of markets nearby. Like I'm fortunate, I work with a cover crop company. Like in my area, West Central Iowa, there's really not that many places where if you grew a couple hundred acres of oats, you'd be in trouble because there's really not a lot of places to go with it. Also, since I work in crop insurance, I kind of know the issues with it firsthand on how it incentivizes corn, beans, and that's it. It'd be a huge risk personally. I mean, I make more money on my oats than I do on corn and beans, but with the way crop insurance works out, I could never take a goose egg on it. So I'm kind of forced to keep corn and beans and just do a little bit oats at a time. So that needs to be there needs to be different incentives to do small grains. It's better for your soil, better for the following crops yield also. But we just don't have the markets. There's a new exciting market for oats coming up, be coming online, I think next summer. So in the future, I look to be growing several hundred acres of oats is kind of my goal to try and get away from any of the less profitable corn beans. It just depends. Some years corn's better than beans. Sometimes beans better than corn. You got to be able to swivel and change, and just constantly be looking for different alternatives.
Maureen, do you have anything other than the orchard, the pumpkin patch, and are you
So,
growing other kind of crops?
right. So we have the an acre of peaches, which is a high risk in Iowa, but we had some space for it. So we get a crop about every 3 years. When it gets to about minus 15 below in the wintertime, that pretty much takes out your crop for that year, which happened again this past winter. And then we raise about 400 to 500 fall mums from plugs. They're on the fertigation system. We have a 2-acre sorghum Sudan grass maze. The reason we went to sorghum Sudan grass was because the raccoons were tearing down our maze going for the corn, and a 2-acre maze is just not big enough to sustain that kind of damage. We have a lot of timber area, and so the sorghum Sudan grass has worked perfectly for us as far as a maze is concerned. We're kind of rotating between the pumpkins and the sorghum Sudan grass. That's how we're doing that at this point.
Last month, I went to a lavender farm near Oxford, Iowa. And as I was sitting out there listening to a band and munching on pizza, I thought to myself, looking over the lavender, who knew? Had no idea. And also, I had no idea about the markets for lavender. And that kind of brings up a question. What kind of markets exist for some of these crops. Apples, for example, but I'm thinking about even flax or canola, sunflowers, things like that. What can you say about the markets that exist for something that isn't corn and soybeans, which take up 75% of our acres? Maury, why don't you go? You've got the
Sure.
orchard.
Sure. So with apples in particular, I find that most of our market really is local. We, in our early years, would go to farmers markets, and that's a great place to go to for sure. And we wanted to increase our traffic out here, and so local market really is pretty much it for apples. Trying to compete with the apples that come in from Michigan and Washington State, that's pretty difficult. Some of the local grocery stores like Fairway and Hy-Vee, if you work with their produce managers, they'll take some apples from time to time. So I think for the most part, you really have to focus on local. And so, having said that, when you think of wholesale versus retail, and you think, "Wow, gosh, retail, you're getting that top dollar." Well, yes, you are from the customer, but your retail infrastructure becomes a huge expense as well, which we can talk about at some point if you want to. But so it really kind of puts a dent in the retail dollar that you're receiving.
Well, why don't we talk about the consumers now? Go ahead.
Okay. So for us, for example, and again, starting from scratch, we weren't a multi-generational farm here. And so we did not have barns, we didn't have tractors, we didn't have a house to live in. And so we first started selling apples right off of our front porch, actually from within our house. And then off the front porch, we were handling our apples, washing them in a basement certified kitchen with the Iowa Department of Inspections and Appeals. And from there, we eventually built our house, a garage, and a breezeway in between the house and the garage. So the breezeway became our little store. Then in 2006, we had the opportunity to purchase an additional parcel, a 30-acre piece, and then we put a 50 by 30 building on that, and that became all of our handling area as well as our retail shop. And so, we had to move power up there, water up there, everything that goes into making a finished building. And then over the years, we've expanded our kitchen area. We have now another 60 by 40 building that attaches to that building, and then a machine shed and so on. And so uh, then if you throw agritourism on top of that, which we have done, there's just a lot of infrastructure expenses. And so to get customers to come out, it's not going to be just one thing. If you just have apples, you're not going to draw very many people. If you have apples and you have cider, if you have this and you have that, and that's just what consumers want to do. They want to be able to go to one place and purchase a number of things, not just one thing.
And so the agritourism is the maize, things like that.
The maze, a play area, wagon
Yeah.
rides, those kinds of
Mhm.
things.
Yeah. Do you shoot? Do you shoot anything out of a cannon?
we we don't. We try to minimize some of those kinds of things, and everything that we decide to do goes through our family, which I say is probably about as difficult as going through Congress. So you don't get everybody agreeing. I see James nodding. When you have a family business, it's pretty tight.
A pumpkin farm in North Liberty shoots corn cobs out of a cannon.
Sure.
It's fun.
Yeah.
The Let me talk about the family thing, right? You both are family-owned businesses, first-gen farmers. James, I'm going to start with you. How many people is your farm operation supporting?
So right now, I have my wife and we have two boys, almost a 4-year-old and a 16-month-old son. Right now, probably more on the way in the future. So family is very important, and that's why some of the infrastructure I'm investing in now. I'm 35, but I probably don't need it in my lifetime. But long term, the boys will enjoy it if they're able to farm. So that's why I'm always thinking of the future, trying to add bins as we can for storage for better markets. We just recently built a 50 by 100 shop so we can do more repair work ourselves, buy stuff earlier, save money on it, and store it from freezing, stuff like that.
Do you have employees as well, other than the family?
I don't have full-time employees, but in the fall, I have 2 or 3 people that help. This year, I have a helper from Iowa Central. He's kind of my intern. And then I have a retired guy that's helping with grain cart. And then I have an old high school friend that when his construction stuff slows down, he helps me too. So we primarily do that. So I'll have 3, 4 people in the fall, depending on the crop. But that's kind of seasonal. Then I'll have one kind of helping me on and off in the summertime when we're spraying and Y dropping and doing stuff like that. So we're pretty lean and mean here. When the boys get older, they'll be able to help a lot more, which will be really nice.
Maury, your website has a huge family on it.
We do.
What does the orchard support in terms of family, and also do you have employees?
Sure. So we have 6 kids. Some of them are married and have kids, so we have a lot of grandkids as well. And everyone participates in the business, and the family, and those who participate are paid. And we do have employees in addition to that. Seasonal part-time employees will have anywhere from 20 to 30 part-time seasonal employees each fall. So in the summer, we might have a half a dozen folks working for us. But then as we get into fall season, picking apples, washing, grading apples, waiting on customers, and attending all the various places around the farm where customers might be, then our needs for more labor increases. And so labor is a very difficult thing to put your arms around, especially part-time seasonal. People who are working full-time, that's exactly what they're doing. They're working full-time and they really don't have time to work part-time. So we rely on college kids in between going back to school, high school kids, and on the weekends for some of the kids as well.
I wanted to ask the question about how much your businesses support, because it would seem that the big concern going into a business, especially on your own and taking a lot going into it as first gen, would be, how am I going to feed my family? How am I going to sustain this? And all of the financial woes. And so what made you overcome that psychological barrier, Maury?
So, again, I was working a full-time job as we were building this operation. And you'll see, of course, in a lot of small farms or family farms, somebody's working in addition to the farm operation, either has another job or spouse is working another job. Um, our business, if we would just stop growing and investing in infrastructure, it would be different than what we're doing right now. So in other words, again, kind of alluding to what James was talking about, and I'm many years down the road from where James is in terms of age, but we're still planning for the future, and so we're still investing. And so I don't think you ever get away from investing. So when you talk in terms of how many people it supports and that kind of thing, um, it does support us, my wife and I, but we also do have Social Security, and I have IPERS from working at the Iowa Department of Agriculture. But we would do just fine if we would stop investing in the farm, but we continue to invest. So any of that profit, any of the money that we're making, most of that goes right back into the farm right now for a couple of reasons. One, just to continue to develop the infrastructure, providing for hopefully, future for someone in the family to take it over, as well as you always have tax issues too. And so you hold on to it. Your tax burden is a little bit higher than if you're investing back in your business. So there's some policy issues that get tied up into all of it.
James, you also were involved with other businesses as you were able to get your start and increment it over a period of time in a measured way. How helpful was that? It's an obvious question, but
Yeah, no, it was kind of terrifying going into farming, because when I was an adjuster, I had a nice cushy salary and you got paid every 2 weeks, no problem. I knew I would be a way better agent than adjuster, but when I went to being an agent, I'd have 100% commission. So you go from company vehicle and salary and healthcare to nothing. So that was pretty scary. And my one friend that was an agent was trying to get me to do it. I told him I wouldn't do it. And then when the farm operation became reality, I kind of jumped in head first, like I'm famous for doing, and started becoming an agent and got rid of the cushy salary and kind of started living off a little savings that I had made, and then started farming hard. And um, that's how that's how that has gone. Anyways, my wife stays home with the children and helps on the farm. So that's so the insurance kind of helps put food on the table, because we were in a very steep curve of just investing on the farm, with the shop. Next project, we're gonna need bins. We're, updating semis so we can haul the grain. It's constant, never ending. And if you take your foot off the gas for a second, you're 10 years behind, it seems like. So it's just never ending. Like I said, we're trying to make money. We're not trying to outspend what we make, but a lot of these investments in infrastructure are expensive, but we can't afford not to do them.
Iowa State University Extension suggests a lot of alternative crops. So we've been talking about apples and oats and pumpkins, things and mums. But from Iowa State University, amaranth, buckwheat, cowpea, dry edible beans. James, you were talking a little bit about how you do your farming, but talk about some farming practices that can help someone who wants to get involved in an alternative crop like that. And what I'm talking about is the way you till and the way you treat the land when you're growing these crops.
Sure. So just in general, for me, when I started farming, I knew I could not farm like the previous generation just because of the financial barriers and the way the markets are, and or like anybody established. So the guy that I took over, he was doing a lot of no-till and strip-till. So I took that to the next level. So now like all our soybeans get planted green no-till into cover crop. And then by doing that, we save a lot of money on tillage. We also save a lot of money on herbicide. We skip all our residual herbicide then and just use a burn down to get rid of the rye. So that's a huge savings. And then on our corn, we've also went to a strip till where instead of doing full tillage, which costs a lot, you have a big tractor dedicated to that, which I can't afford. We do strip till. So I use the same tractor I plant with that I strip till. So I'm doing two jobs with one tractor. We're banning the fertility, which reduces the fertility amount greatly. So that saves a lot of money. It's a lot of thinking outside of the box. It's really uncomfortable because you look around and nobody else is doing it. And they're always looking and watching and stuff. But doing that stuff is what you have to do. I think if you're a first generation, like I said, you can't do things the way everybody else is doing it. And that sounds bad, but that's just how it is. Like I said, I can't have like a ripping tractor and a ripper and a field cultivator. So instead I have one strip till bar, and I reduce my dry fertilizer by 30-40% at least. And the tillage cost is way down because I'm using a 250 horsepower tractor versus a 500 horse tractor just for tillage alone. So you just got to count up all the costs. And remember, even if you're not writing the check to you, there's a cost. Just even if the tractor's paid for, there's still a cost.
Can you buy crop insurance for buckwheat if you're growing buckwheat?
Yeah, they have written agreements. I have a customer that has crop insurance on rye. It's not as good as what you would want, but it takes several years, like 3 years of sales and yield to get kind of a coverage. And that's the problem with these small grains is a lot of the markets aren't near us, so it costs a lot to do that. But it's the guarantee where, like on corn, you could have a 200 bushel guarantee and take out 85% coverage, and you're good to go because you have to keep the landowner happy and pay the rent, whether you make $1 or make a ton. They don't care, so you need that guarantee. Where like with my issue with oats, for instance, you can get 120 bushels of oats, but in my area the average for crop insurance is 60 bushels or so, and then you can only take out like 70-80% of that. So it's really not worth the coverage. But say a big storm comes, you get absolutely nothing, where with the corn you would have had a base that would cover your rent, and then you'd be around for next year. So as a young person, I can't, like I said, even though the risk is there, I can make more money. If I ever had a 80 or 100 acres go completely goose egg, that would be just catastrophic for us. We couldn't do it. So that's the issue.
Maury, what kind of insurance do you have? Where can you get insurance for?
Right. So similar issues I don't have for crop insurance. Some growers might have hail insurance, but to get insurance for your apple crop is nearly impossible. There is the NAP program with USDA, the Non-Insured Assistance Program, and that's not a great program. It's not really an insurance program. It is disaster assistance. A grower can buy into that. But they utilize, now again, I'm talking a little bit from history here when I worked at the Department of Ag. They utilize a Chicago Board of Trade prices. So, apples coming through there or that terminal market, I should say, in Chicago. Apples coming through there are such a low price per case, and they use that, and then you only get like 50% of that on 60% of your loss. So when you add it all up, it's like it's just not worth it to do it. And so I don't really know any apple growers that have any kind of insurance, and that goes pretty much for all fruit and vegetable production.
Boy, what happens then if you get a bad crop, or something hits your trees, a disease, one of the bugs come through?
It's on you. And I know that a couple growers last year had hail damage to their apples, to their orchard, and they were really just they had to rely on all the other things that they do on their farm, and this becomes the whole idea of diversifying.
I want to ask you more. What's the market for apples? Is it strictly local or is it regional? Can you compete with, say, the orchards out in Washington State that ship nationally?
Right. So Washington State, and I'm going from recall here, produces upwards of 120 million bushels of apples a year. In Iowa, and I kept this data when I was at the Iowa Department of Ag, in Iowa, we don't produce even 250,000 of bushels of apples in the state. The state used to, I mean, our high water mark on apple production in Iowa was about 11 million back in the 40s, or before the 40s, before we had the Armistice Day freeze that took out a lot of orchards. But so back in that day, they did produce apples that were wholesale, and they competed well, but Washington just came on like gangbusters, and Iowa became more of a corn and bean and hog state. And so we don't have the infrastructure for that kind of production here. Most of, or a lot of, the apples grown at Washington State are vertically integrated. They have the packers, they have the stores all lined up. In fact, there's some varieties that are called club variety apples that a grower like me would not be able to even purchase. So a large grower would, it would go to a packing house, and that packing house would have an agreement with an outlet, let's say Walmart or whatever, and that's where you would find that apple. So then there's also the price issue, just because of the scale of things, and the larger operations are using optical equipment to grade their apples to get the right color, the size, perfection. And so what smaller growers like us in our state do, we offer U-pick. We sell on the farm, some go to farmers markets. And generally that's sufficient to be able to sell your crop. If you were to grow and try to grow 100 or 200 acres of apples in Iowa, you would be hard pressed to be able to sell those markets and really enter that wholesale market with a good enough margin, I think, to succeed at that. So I would encourage people, if they're thinking about it, look at the local market, look at their competition that surrounds them, and really come up with a plan on how you're going to sell your apples locally or perhaps regionally.
Some orchards are coming up with ciders and spiked ciders with alcohol content, fermented. Are you doing that?
So no, we would like to do that perhaps in the future. There are very few apple cider makers in the state anymore. When the U.S. government decided to require pasteurization for cider, if you can make apple cider on your farm and sell it directly to a customer without pasteurizing, but you have to put all kinds of warning signs on your label. And so there are some that do that. But to enter into pasteurization equipment is extremely expensive. You're entering into some federal regulations, and it's very difficult. And so, so those operations that do that, that are large enough to do that, they're the ones that are moving also into hard cider. And so it's something we've contemplated. We've done, some spreadsheets on it to figure out how we can possibly do it. It's not really in our near future, but maybe in the distant future.
We've talked about some of the problems that exist and the hurdles that you have to go through, especially if you don't want to grow corn and soybeans in Iowa. One of the questions I have is, are there any public policies that affect whether or not you can grow something other than corn and soybeans? Anything that you run into at your farms that you either have to overcome or are there and help, but we just don't know about? James, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, you can plant whatever you want, really, depending on your landlord. Like in my area in Iowa, land is heavily.
I think we lost James. He must have hit something. We'll give him a chance to get back. Oh, there he is.
Sorry.
All right, we got you.
Land is heavily rented. It's not owned as much as like it used to be 60, 70 years ago. So you're at the mercy of your landlords, and some landlords will have contracts that say you have to grow corn and beans. So then you kind of have to play by those rules, which is unfortunate. But there are cost share programs. None of them are earth shattering traditionally. So if you want to do something, you really need to secure the market, have the infrastructure, kind of like Maury was talking about. But like I said, in my area, if you want to grow oats, you can grow oats. It's just getting them to a market. Someone will pay. I mean, I have friends that grow oats every year for some of their livestock, and they always have extra, and they have to store it to the following year because there's just nowhere to take them. Nobody will pay for them. So yeah, so we're mainly just corn and beans, which is really unfortunate, but we're trying to change that. And with Landon's oat milk coming online soon, I think that will help long term. Maybe other outfits and investors will find other products that we're shipping into the United States that we can grow here. I think that'll be great for diversification, because we need a third crop, if not a fourth crop, to just cut back on the high corn and beans to get the prices back up where it's profitable. We to keep doing what we've always done and be surprised that we have different outcomes.
The Gazette's Tom Barton published a story last night at Gazette.com. Grassley, Iowa Soybean Association pressed Trump to act as farmers lose Chinese market. Is there anybody out there doing the same thing for oats? Pressing for opening up market?
Yeah, so one of my friends, Landon Plaguey, he has that Green Acre Milling up in Albert Lee, Minnesota. They are building, I don't remember the exact number, I think it's like a $60 million oat plant facility, and they'll be processing oats, food grade oats, to be shipped all over the West Coast, East Coast. They'll save the oat hulls for cattle feed, and it's very profitable. They'll pay way more than what traditional oats have been paying. So they're pushing for it. Like I said, a lot of people are pushing for the small grains, but we just don't have the markets. Where Landon's one of the first people that have actually making a market. So that's pretty exciting. And like I said, my family hopes to grow oats for them in the very near future.
And in fact, that Albert Lee example is something that speaks to how alternative crops can go far beyond just farm, but actually help build communities. Albert Lee, of course, has struggled over the years, especially after issues with farmland and leaving and whatnot. And so that's huge for Albert Lee too, that area, I would think, thanks to an alternative crop.
Yeah, yep. And it'll be huge for rural America too, because of the profitability aspect. Like the oat crop, it costs a lot less to grow. Sure, you don't gross as much. Like I told you on the phone earlier, we chase gross instead of chasing net. Net's the most important thing. You can have $400 plus without rent on a corn crop and make $50, or you can have $200 in an oat crop and make $100. What do you want to do? But the scary part is the coverage with insurance. So we're kind of forced into it. But if we have markets, like I said, I'm really hoping to have 300-400 acres of oats in the next couple of years to sell to Landon, and even I can truck it up to Albert Lee, and it's still profitable. So,
Maury, that idea of net profit instead of bulk, how do you manage that at the orchard?
Absolutely. So, well, and that's one of the advantage of selling your product locally. You are in charge of your retail price. Obviously, you have to scan the area, look and see what kind of competition exists, how you can manage, position yourself related to that competition, but you can set your own price. And so, whether that's increasing a price of pumpkins or apples, let's say you might be short in one of those areas one year, you can regulate that yourself. So that's how we deal with that. We also, and kind of going back to one of your other questions, the kinds of restrictions that policies might play in this, I would encourage people to, especially if you're going to sell on the farm, talk with your planning and development folks in the county to make sure that that you can do that. Otherwise, you can plant anything you want to plant. You are free to plant whatever. I know, again, going back to my Iowa Department of Ag days, where some folks, you're in the country essentially, but you're kind of within city limits. And so then they might put restrictions on you and say, you really can't, it's not a farmland, it's not designated farm ground. So those are the kinds of things you want to, before you start making an investment in your operation, check it out with the local regulators, make sure that you can do what you want to do.
Well, you're free to plant, but you're not guaranteed a market, and you're not
That's right.
guaranteed consumers' right.
That's
And
right.
that's where that risk factor comes in. Are there public policies that reduce the risk for corn and soybeans in a way that they don't reduce the risk for, say, an apple orchard?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like I said, with crop insurance alone, and some of the payments, like I said, it really incentivizes us to do corn and beans, and it almost makes you look crazy if you want to do anything but corn and beans, even though the money's there. So it's really unfortunate. And then every year we keep getting these, big crops, price goes down, and you hear all the sob stories about people not making any money and stuff. But it's another one of those 2+2 is 6 deals. It's just a domino effect. We just can't keep growing more and more. And every year yield increases naturally just because of genetics and technology and things improve. So we got to change stuff. But like I said, we have to have the actual markets, a place to pull your semi into and dump the load at. We have to have those. And I'm thankful. I think some of that stuff's coming online, but it's major investments like with Landon's deal. They can pay so much more because traditionally oats come from Canada. I'm not an expert on it, but from what he told me is by the time they ship it down here and mess around with it and stuff, that's where the profit's gone. So if he gets oats here, there's an extra, like for instance, I'm getting like $4 to $4.50 a bushel oats. Well, with him, I could get $6 to $7 a bushel oats. That's a huge deal. Plus there's value in the oat hulls and stuff. So, that's where, like I said, we need the markets, but yeah, right now we are stuck in a corn bean issue right now.
And so as we're talking about corn and soybeans, it makes it sound like we're trashing it. We're not. It certainly is driving the economy. Is it important to have alternative crops, or could Iowa just say, all right, corn and soybeans, that's it. Let's do some oats because there is a local market, some wheat. Why not just do that?
Yeah, no, I think for the future to be profitable, I think we have to have these different crops. And a lot of groups will say diversification, and they'll say small things like growing flowers or eggs or something like that. Well, that's not enough. We need to be realistic on, what can you do with that 80 or 40 acres, something that's profitable. So like I said, we need more than corn and beans. Sure, we're really good at corn and beans. That's fine. But like I've said, if you took 5% of corn and bean acres away and put it into something specialty crop, that would add value to our communities. It'd return better ROI for each farm. And then everybody would win. And in return, if you took 5% off all those acres, naturally the price would go back up a little bit on corn and beans, which would be good. So it'd be a win-win all the way around.
Maury, same question. Are alternative crops needed in Iowa?
Well, I would say that alternative crops, particularly in the fruit and vegetable side, the horticultural side, provides a niche for the grower, but also provides something for the environment too. So in other words, for example, in my situation here, we are on very hilly ground. When we purchased this ground was farmed for years and probably shouldn't have been. It's highly erodible. So it's really the best place for a perennial crop for soil management, number one. And number two, just for air circulation and the type of crop that we grow, which would be apples, it's a good environment for it. So some of the little places that people want to do something with really is well suited for a perennial crop, some sort of specialty perennial crop like apples, that you should not be growing corn and soybeans on in any kind of regular situation.
What's your busiest day at the orchard, Maury?
So for us, it tends to be, if we could ever have any fall weather, about the second weekend in October. And that's usually when we peak in terms of the amount of customers that come out. So we've been busy every weekend since we opened, but it will continue to get busier. But this is we've had this really hot weather, and it makes it a little more challenging to sell pumpkins to people when all the queues aren't there. People are really we're creatures of habit, and so when the trees start to change colors and you get the cool air and people are putting on sweaters and jackets, those are all cues to go out to the farm and have an experience. And we have not really had that even the last couple 2 or 3 years. So fall has come later and it's been shorter.
And when is your downtime?
So our downtime begins pretty much in November through December and January. We seriously start to do some planning for the year. Over the winter we do, but then we start gearing up for pruning and preparing for planting and getting all the equipment ready for what we have to do in terms of spraying and so on.
James, when is downtime for you?
Well, if you ask me or ask my wife, you'll get a different answer. Well, with traditional farming, it's kind of all over the place, but with my crop insurance business, so once the crop's done and you get it in the bins in November or so, then you got field work to do, like my strip till and planting. So that seems to take forever. And then about right around Christmas, I normally try and take a couple weeks and just kind of slow down. But even then, we're hauling grain, make sure all the bins are good to go. And then in January through March, it's kind of sales season on crop insurance and hauling grain still. It's go, go, go. And then month of March, you get stuff ready for insurance deadline. You're planting in April, and then it just starts all over again. So I feel like I get a couple weeks here and there, and then a few weekends. I always try and take Sundays off, spend time with the family and stuff like that. But it's pretty constant, really. I just don't know any different anymore.
Now, we've talked about land use practices. We've talked about the economics, in the environment, a lot of different reasons that you two are involved in this kind of farming. But what we have not talked about is that internal need, the passion that goes into this, which I would suspect, given the hurdles to get started up, are necessary. James, what drives you to do this?
So, like I said, being a first generation, kind of like Mari can attest to that, like you have to make money. It's not a hobby. It's not just for fun. You can't go off feelings. Like I told you on the phone, also, we've done lots of trials over the years and we've had stuff look way better. But when the combine hits it, there's no difference. So you can't pay for that kind of stuff. So you got to constantly just be willing to change. That's kind of what we do.
And but you want to do this.
Yep.
Why?
Oh, so my two kids, I know we can all do better. Always, no matter what. I mean, we need cleaner water. We need healthier soil. And like I said, I had a great role model that I took over as a farmer, but we can always do better. Like I said, I want clean water, healthy soils for my children, and for everybody's children, really. I mean, I want to make things better, and we can make things better. Some of the groups I'm in with, like Extreme Ag and my good friend Kelly Garrett, we've learned how to reduce nitrogen by a lot, reduce synthetic fertilizer a lot, reduce tillage to virtually none. Like I said, I'm cover cropping every acre. I can hear the drill running in the background right now. So my goal is to have everything covered so you don't get soil erosion in the wintertime, because the last few winters we've had no snow cover and you see the dirt blowing in the ditch, and that really upsets me, because that's where your pollution comes from. Every speck of dirt has fertility. It goes to the low spot and gets washed down and stuff. So I just want we can all do better no matter what. So that's kind of my mentality, and that's what my push, and that drives me, because I've seen the changes I've seen in the last 5 to 7 years. So it really excites me to see, if we just keep pushing hard, what it'll be like in 30 years.
And I want to get back to that idea in a second. First of all, Maury, what drives you to do this?
So I would say primarily family. It was how we wanted to raise our family. We wanted to raise our family with kind of a land ethic where people were working, learning responsibility, taking care of things. I also just had a vision of growing, an operation. I just felt compelled to have an affinity to apple trees and wanted to grow them and create some beauty on the landscape, which I think that we have been doing. And I would add that this kind of specialty crop production that we're involved in, and James could probably speak to this as well, is that it's labor intensive. I mean, it is. I'm not a corn and bean farmer, but I'm going to guess we're doing a lot of footwork, handwork. You do tractor work, but a lot of this is very manual. It's hard on the body. And so anyone who's interested in this, it takes a lot of physical strength and energy. And particularly as I get older and our family, gets older here too. So, but really it comes down to family. And, when the grandkids come and we just had some baby goats, not that the goats are profitable, they're part of our agritourism, but just to see the family kind of coalesce around the farm, and they come back to the farm, they help on the farm. And then we see other families coming here as customers, and they're getting a glimpse of this way of life, as well as how you produce a food crop. We produce a crop that actually goes right on the table for people, and people will talk about that. And so that's what drives us, the enjoyment that other families have, and basically our family.
All right, back to you, James. You were talking about some of the sustainability information that you were driving at. Talk to us about field days, because you have done some field days. What is that, and what's its purpose?
So three years ago, when I started learning a lot about stuff and changing things on our farm and seeing it work firsthand, and then I see everybody else is doing the opposite and struggling, I thought, man, that'd be kind of fun to do a field day. So my first field day, I worked with Practical Farmers of Iowa, and we just talked about all my cover crops, because in my area, I'm one of there's probably 5 or 6 people that do a lot of cover crops. And it went really well. We had over 75 people showed up. I was shocked.
They come to your place?
Yep.
For this?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So we had it on my farm. We had people from 2 hours away plus, and almost everybody I tried to ask, why did you come? And they just said, well, Western Iowa, there's kind of a dead spot of this kind of things. You see constant events over like by Dubuque and stuff like that. So I thought, well, maybe there's something to this. And it was a great community event. I had the local pork producers grilling pork burgers. And we had a couple speakers, and I made everybody come out in the field and look at the rye and touch it and learn and see my soybeans growing in the rye. So then the following year, I did my own field day without any sponsors or whatever. And I had another 70, 80 people show up, and we started talking about ROI and reducing synthetic fertilizers and stuff like that. Then this last year we did Iowa Learning Farms, and we did kind of the same thing and talked about erosion and stuff. And it's just a passion to try and, like I said, I learned from so many great people, and I just want to spread the word and get other people to do it, because if we can all become more diverse, more profitable, build something proud that the next generation can come back to, have it not be such an uphill battle, then maybe our rural communities can be sustained. And it comes back to profitability, like that. So,
Maury, are your children going to take over the orchard?
Well, we hope so, and we get indications of such. They kind of like it how it is right now, but we'll see. We're yet to see that at this point.
Yeah. And so then what is your handoff plan, so to speak, when you leave and you hand this orchard off, at least what you're doing?
Yes, that's a great question. I mean, we've had conversations with some attorneys and accountants on just that subject, and we have a kind of unique situation, I suppose. I mean, to me, it doesn't seem that unique, but our home is kind of smack dab in the middle of the operation, the farm, the acres where we're raising the apple trees. And for some reason, that does present a little bit of a challenge as we talk with some ag attorneys on succession planning. And so we're trying to figure out a lot of that right now. Honestly, we've not made any firm decisions, but we're still trying to figure it out.
But you're thinking about it.
Oh, we are, and one of our sons has really been working full time with us on the farm, and he's expressed a lot of interest in taking over the farm. But you know, he's young yet; he's in his early 20s, and we'll see where that goes.
James, you're not anywhere close to the exit strategy, but farming is becoming an aging industry in Iowa, is it not? What do you think about the next generation of farmers, and what can we do about that?
Well, my thoughts, some people might think are kind of radical, but I think we're going to have a huge shortage of farmers, like physical, not just helpers, but actual managers, tractor operators, stuff like that. Because I look around my neighborhood. Yeah, I'm 35, but really, I'm still, yeah, it kind of scares me with my almost 4-year-old. He's going to be 18, 19 in a blink of an eye, and I'm hoping that he will want to help. But I look around all my neighborhood, and everybody's 50 to 70, 50, and as equipment's gotten nicer, guys have held on longer. I have a really good tax guy that helps me, and he tells me a lot of guys, it takes, if you really work hard your entire career, it could take 10 years at least to unwind all of the stuff you've done. So if you wait till you're 70 and then decide to retire, you realize you can't afford to retire due to tax burdens, and it takes 10 years to unwind. And then, so you can't start too early. Like I said, my kids are a little too young right now, but they just live for anything with tractors. We also enjoy the farm life. This last summer, we raised 60 broilers, and that's some of the best chicken we've ever had in our life. My 4-year-old, he would come out every morning, and we had him in chicken tractors, and we'd move him around the yard, and he just loved it. He never missed a morning. Helped us get him processed and everything. I was shocked at how much help he really was. But it brought pride, and when we had the chicken, he was proud of it, even for a 3-year-old. So it's kind of a quality of life deal, but it's pretty scary because I look around and I don't want to be the only one around. I've talked to people. Calhoun County has like 350,000 acres of tillable land. Jesus, there are going to be 15 or 20 farmers left in 10 years. You just don't know.
And how do you adapt from year to year? Farming is, in many ways, an industry that has its traditions and the way we do things. How do you deal with that?
So I'm fortunate. I don't have any traditions. And the guy that I took over, that was another thing too. He wanted somebody new, so they didn't have that. Well, this is the way we've always done it attitude. Um, so it's really easy for me. I have a lot of people that come to me like with consulting and say, "Boy, I know it works, but I just can't do it." So I feel for people. It's quite the burden when you have that attitude. But that's why we need some first generation farmers. There's a lot of great people out there that are very capable of doing it, but you just have to have the land base. Where I was fortunate to have one landowner with enough acres to get me going, that's where you need to get a bunch of like 3 or 4 families that have 300 to 500 acres apiece and come together and say, "Hey, we like this guy. Let's help them and rent our ground to this guy and get them going." Because it's not sustainable if you're just getting into corn and beans to have a couple hundred acres. But like I said, 4 to 5 people, like always, together we're way stronger than by ourselves.
Maury, what are your thoughts about the future and what we need to do with these farmers?
Well, I would agree with James. I mean, if you look at the charts, you look at some of the information that's out there, and Leopold Center had put together a pretty interesting chart some time ago, and it just shows how farms have become less diversified over the years and how the number of farmers have decreased over the years. I'm not sure how to stop the bleeding, so to speak. We're training people to work in offices. Our educational process really, I think, moves people into that direction. And so I think the best influence on some of the young people are the farmers themselves, to really talk with them about the way of life and the rewards that come with this kind of farming. But it is hard, but the rewards and the freedom to be able to do what you want to do and create something, is tremendous. So there's a strong influence, like I say, that moves the populace into a different environment. So we have to work hard to kind of get our message out.
We are nearing the end of the session, so if people want to ask any questions, feel free to do so in the chat. We'll make sure that James or Maury can answer them. But as we're getting to that point, what are the things that you two, as people who favor alternative crops, think that you can do to encourage more of this? People to look into other ways of farming other than the traditional corn, soybeans, for example. Maury, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, so we have something called the Iowa Specialty Growers Conference or Association in the state, and used to be the Iowa Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association. We have an annual conference at DMAC FFA Center in Ankeny. I'd encourage people to look that up and attend if they possibly can. And it is primarily horticultural crops, but that doesn't mean we can't look at other specialty crops. Networking is important, and I think James mentioned this several times about the people who he's talked with, he's learned from, and he's also teaching other people. It's the same with me. I have learned from many, many growers, and just a great group of people that are willing to give information out for free. They're willing to tell you their mistakes. And so it's really a great environment. So that's what I would suggest.
All right. Let's get down to best practices and final advice that people can take from this session. Maury, let's start with you. Some of the best practices that you think you have learned or developed at the orchard that you think would help other people looking into alternative crops.
So we have a portion of our apple orchard has been certified organic for a number of years. And so, I've been very much deeply involved in that over the years, having managed the organic program at the state. I'm surprised, not as much demand that I thought there would be as far as organic is concerned, but it's very difficult. So if you're going to endeavor into organic, really do your homework. We're in Iowa, obviously. It's different than growing a crop west of the Rockies. So we have every insect and every disease here. And so there's much to learn as far as that goes. We have part of our orchard what we call sustainably grown, which is not a regulated term, but it's kind of a combination between conventional and organic practices. The other thing that I would mention as far as best practices is to look at best business practices. I mean, it really all starts on paper. And in your head, you have to really think through a lot of things. You have to put some spreadsheets together. And I know this from talking with other farmers. Farmers get pretty good at doing math in their head because they're spending a lot of time, on the field working and on the tractor. So really get it down to dollars and cents on the paper, because if it can't be profitable, you really shouldn't do it. You have to make a profit.
James?
Yeah. So the biggest thing I tell people when I start talking to them is ask why. Not in a disrespectful way, but scrutinize everything you do. Why do we do that? Does it make a difference? Does it pay? And if the answer is no, then you need to change. And if it doesn't work, also look into it and see why it doesn't work. Maybe you're doing something wrong. So that's what I try and promote. Everybody just spark the question why, to try and get rid of that tradition-based, we always rip the corn stalks. Well, why? Have you ever thought about, planting cover crop and planting green into the beans and saving $60, $70 an acre in tillage and having the same yield? People just don't. They get stuck in their busy season, and they get so busy they just get going. So that's what I try and do. I've been fortunate enough to gain traction with being one of very few young farmers, and I've been talking at the No-Till Conference, the National No-Till Conference, which this year will be in St. Louis. I'll be up on the main stage. There'll be 600 to 700 people there talking about like the young farmer issues and stuff like that. So that'll be pretty exciting. But basically, just scrutinize everything you do, and like I said, I try and tell people, put your feelings in the back seat, because you need to do business like Maury was saying, and does it pay? And even if it does pay, is the return good enough? If you're spending $20 and getting $21 back, sure, right, it's a return, but would it be better off to put that $20 into something else, like a long-term asset? I would say probably yes, but everything's different, and just be willing to change. Because like I said, when I was farming 3 years ago, we're doing stuff way different. And so I can't wait to see what the next 3 years brings. So always be willing to change, ask why. And like I said, do your numbers, know your math. If you know your math, you'll be able to market stuff a lot better. You'll be able to buy stuff better. Like I said, just the emotions gets everybody, peer pressure and emotions gets people in a lot of trouble with agriculture. And if you can avoid that, it's very difficult, but if you can avoid that, you'll be above the rest pretty quickly.
Gentlemen, thank you. Maury, we're going to let you get back to the orchard. James, you're already out doing stuff. We'll let you get back to what you're doing. I want to thank you. It's been a wonderful conversation. Good luck to both of you. Thanks for joining us today on this track. This is a great way to get this second day started. I would invite you to join if you would like at 11:45. I'll be hosting another track in agriculture, and this one is on energy and environment. We'll talk more about some of the tech stuff going on. I'm Lyle Muller. Thank you to the Gazette for hosting this, and thank you again for ITC Midwest. We're going to sign out. I'm Lyle Muller.